Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We are going to take a look at this pretty unusual knife that definitely screams Spyderco. This is the Spyderco Ouroboros. And this knife was originally designed and created and launched back in 2016 by an automotive engineer by the name of Paul Alexander. Actually saw him chatting with various people in the Spyderco forums from back in the day, talking about his knife. Obviously very proud of his work. This is clearly a very unusual shape and usage of a knife. We're going to take a look at the good, the bad, the ugly. This thing really went out of production, I think, only after a couple of years. It's really hard to find these out in the wild anymore, and if you do, I think I saw one listing of this for an original version at $300. Originally, when these first came out in the market, they were priced at about $188. That was pretty controversial back then. We're going to talk about why in just a minute. Before we get too far into this, if you would please, if you're not already joined, we'd love to have you join our little band of renegades. Hit that subscribe and notification bell. That will let you know when we put out some new videos. Throw me a thumbs up if you would, all my friends out there, to help your buddy out, because I certainly could use it on this channel. So thanks so much for that. We'll start by taking a quick peek at the box. I should have clarified, I don't think I have made this clear yet, this is a replica knife. I did buy this from 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗋𝗋𝗋. They actually were kind enough, after God knows how many review videos on their knives, that all of their knives except one I paid for out of my pocket from 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗋𝗋. So just because you have a channel and do video reviews doesn't mean people just send you knives, especially when you're in this end of the kiddie pool, you know, and the kind of knives that we work in and the replicas and whatnot. But my point was, 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗋𝗋 was kind enough to send me a gift certificate for $100 and said, here you go, here's a gift certificate for $100. You can go buy whatever you want off of our website. We're grateful that you have given us, you know, so many good reviews. So yeehaw for that. I went in there and I bought 4 different knives, obviously at an average cost of $25 each. I think I was maybe $5 over my $100 by the time all was said and done, and this was one of those knives. So obviously I got 3 more knives I'm going to be bringing to you guys here coming up in the next week or so. So I thought I'd start with this one. This one is very cool to me. Let's take a look at the box. This is the standard, you know, knockoff Spyderco box. This knife was never made in Golden, Colorado. This is not a box that has any labels on it whatsoever. I think they just pulled a blank box off the shelf. They didn't even put any papers or anything in there. They put it in some plastic, tossed it in the box, and out the door it goes. That's what you get with these a lot of times. No big deal. I don't get it for the box, so not particularly worried about that. Let's do some size comps before we get into more detailed stuff. I always like to go with the most common knives I think that you guys have all had or seen, or probably should have at least one of these. You've got the PM2, in this case the OK81 version, and the Para 3. You can see this knife is actually shorter by a good bit than both of these knives. So I'm going to say this is more on the small side. Let's do one more comparison here. I apologize to my guy who I told you I would do. Oh, I found my dollar bill. I couldn't find my dollar bill. XM18, clearly much bigger, and then the good old Ozark Trail, basically the same size as your average bug out. Obviously, this knife that we're looking at today is much smaller than both of those. And I did find my dollar. I've rearranged my table here, so I apologize for that. Here's how it looks on a dollar bill. You can see this thing just barely clears that dollar. That being said, because of the way you can choke up on this thing, look at all the space I have on the back end of this knife. Anybody with large, extra large, and probably even double XL is probably going to fit just fine in here. Even this finger choil is made for fairly large fingers. I have a size large glove, so, you know, I'm a typical, not even a large, you know, what it would be considered large for a man. I've got average size large hands. Plenty of space. All right, pretty cool on that. The whole thing is this unique design and blade shape. But let's talk about the specs real quick. So I'll bring up the specs down the side of the screen. You can see on the right hand side is this replica version that I have in my hand from 𝗥𝗲𝗽𝗋𝗋. A little bit shorter than the real deal, you know, just a little bit, maybe 1/10 of an inch shorter. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. Same thing on the blade. It was hard for me to figure out, where are they measuring this blade? Are they measuring it from the tip to the center? They should be measuring it from the tip to the very closest point here, and then of course you've got a cutting length. So I'm just going to tell you, this is 2 3/4 inch from the tip to the scales, and you got 2.5 inches on the cutting length. The close length does match up, 4.16 inches. The blade thickness is a relatively average, medium on the thinner side, 110 thousandths. This is just about perfect, kind of a Goldilocks size to me. Handle thickness in mine came in a little bit thicker at 4.64. The original one says it's a good bit thinner than that. This is obviously a satin finish blade with a full flat grind, as Spydercos tend to do. Scales are G10, which, as always, I love the G10 scales that Spyderco does. This is no exception to that. It's smooth enough yet grippy enough. I just love the way they do and the texture they put into their G10 scales. The original knife came in a VG10 steel. Now, OK Knives says this is a VG10. I don't really have any reason to doubt that, because even their inexpensive replica knives are coming in VG10 steel these days. So there's no particular reason for me to doubt that. Although, you know, it was very inexpensive at $25, so I take it with a grain of salt. Let's just put a question mark there and say we don't really know what this is. It does come in a bit heavier than the original, good bit heavier, 3.23 ounces versus 2.65. Some of that may be in just overly thick scales. Maybe this version just has extra. Remember, it was extra thick from the original, so it may just be the extra G10 material that's adding up there. This is true to form the original Spyderco compression lock, and I will tell you, the action on this thing is pretty good. You can see it sticks the landing, and that's something that bothers the heck out of me. Originally, this thing was $188. Now it is $25 at OK Knives for this version. I did measure behind the edge on this thing at 19 thousandths. Now I'm going to tell you, it was actually thinner than 19 thousandths, but I reprofiled the edge on this blade. I just went ahead and did it because I just felt like it. And I thought, you know what? It wasn't actually the greatest grind to begin with. The factory grind on this thing wasn't too hot. So I thought, well, let me just go ahead and reprofile it down to 18 degrees. Well, what that means is that I'm now pushing the edge farther up, right? The beginning of that edge. And that's how I measure it. I measure it from where that edge meets the unfinished part, so up here. And that's where my calipers go, and that's why this one is 19 thousandths. It would probably be 17 or 18 thousandths before I had reprofiled it. Not that that matters, but it's worth mentioning at least. All right, here's some pros and cons. Let's talk about some good stuff. A little closer look. First and foremost, this came with a wire clip. And so I want to show you, I found these clips on, and you guys may have already known about these. I didn't know about these. Let me see if I can add a little extra light into the mix here. You can buy these fold-over clips, like a Lynch style clip, that fit into those little grooves where the wire clip goes. That is pretty darn cool in my book. I wasn't a big fan of the wire clip, and really what they did with this that I kind of was disappointed with is that they used a full-length wire clip. I think the original one came with a short version of the wire clip, which would have been great and perfectly fine, but this one was a long version. It was all the way up to the edge of this scale. It just didn't make any sense at all. So I backed it out and replaced it with one of these deep carry wire clip replacements. So this is really cool. Got this on AliExpress for just a few dollars. I'll throw something over the screen here. I think I've got a screenshot of what I ordered. Ordered a couple of these because I thought, wow, that's really cool. If that works, that's going to be great. And of course, I love the color. Black just disappears on this knife and it doesn't get in the way. It feels very comfortable in the hand. No hot spots thus to speak of. We haven't done the testing with it. We'll see how that goes once we do the testing. So pocket clip replaced, obviously. Action, as I mentioned on this thing, is great. The detent is, I'm going to call it just about perfect. It's not particularly heavy, but it's also hard to fail this knife. You can fail it if you're trying. But if you give it any amount of steam at all, it's going to flip. Plus, it doesn't bounce, and you guys know I hate that bounce. So action on this thing, really good. The compression lock, easy to access, no issues there. Detent is about where it is. Slow rolling, it feels weird because you're not traveling the same amount of distance. It's like this hole is closer to the frame of the knife, so it's like a short trip around the world versus a long trip around the world, if that makes sense. But very cool, very satisfying to open both methods. Here's one where we get into the downsides. For me at least, and this, it's all, you're getting my opinion. That's why you're watching the video. It's my opinion. This edge right here has cut me more than a few times. When I'm trying to move my hand up into placing it up here, I find that I get awfully close to having that finger nick the edge of that blade. And of course, I've reprofiled it to make this pretty darn sharp. It was sharpened before, but it's not hard to cut yourself if you're not paying attention when you go to grip up on this thing. You just tend to slide that finger up a little farther than you should, and you're making contact now potentially with the blade. So I have nicked myself a couple times, nothing bad. The other problem is I can't really do this knife left-handed. With most knives, let's see, I'll grab my PM2, there's this choil that's going to drop down. So I can use my thumb to let the knife drop down to where the choil hits my finger and then drop it closed. Piece of cake. That's the case with most of my Spyderco type knives. With this one, the problem is unless I get my finger way up into this choil, it's just inconvenient and doesn't work well. And if I leave my finger down here, what happens more often than not, by the way, this cut is not from this knife. That's actually a paper cut. I was cutting up some boxes. But this knife, you can't, if you're a righty and you try to do it lefty, you can see this is going to drop and cut your finger. I have cut my finger here a few times, forgetting that I can't use this knife left-handed. Now, I wonder, even if I switch the clip over, the clip is not the factor here. It's the shape of the blade and how far out, and the fact that this will swing around with a sharpened point if you don't have that finger really up high in there. I think that makes sense, but worth mentioning because I like being able to use my knives both righty and lefty without having an issue. And usually with most knives you can, right? All right, so we talked about that. We talked about the wire clip. The cool thing about this knife, obviously, is the continuous arc that it makes all the way around. Very cool, very unique shape. Certainly this screams Spyderco to anybody. You can choke back on this knife. I'm not sure why you would want to. Maybe there's a situation if you're doing some hard push cutting. Maybe when I get into hard push cutting, like doing my wood cuts, this knife is not a big knife made for cutting big hard tasks, although I'm sure it's certainly capable. Here's the other thing that you may not have noticed yet. There's no jimping anywhere on this knife. Steel backspacer, by the way. Very smooth all the way around. And you know what? Paul, the designer of this knife, he actually explained why he did that in some of his Spyderco forum comments, and for the love of me, I cannot remember what it was he said and why he said that. But it's worth pointing out, if you're a fan of jimping, there is nothing here, anywhere along here to really lock you in. That being said, you get this knife in this grip right here, it feels really secure in the hands. It's interesting. I'm just not sure what the actual real-world use case for this is. Certainly, draw cuts are incredibly easy because the angle of it goes down so naturally. You're just slicing packages open all day. Man, this thing's a breeze. I'm not sure if cutting food or food prep is the right way because you can only get to about half of the blade when it's standing up like this. You can see the shadow under there. Here's the other thing that really made people crazy back in the day, and I think this is why they eventually had to pull it from the shelves. Oh, I got another cool thing I got to show you as well. The original knife came in a VG10. A G10 scaled knife, even a Spyderco with a very unique design that's super cool, in a VG10 steel for $188. Normal average retail price. That didn't sit too well with the market. There was a lot of people I saw in a lot of comments. I did some research on it and wanted to see what other people had thought about it. And a lot of people said, you know what, very cool knife. It's a little on the small side. It's not something that just uniquely fits to my daily workloads, but it's a really cool knife from a design standpoint, and everybody loved it and would love to have it in their collection. But $188 for a VG10 steel knife with G10 scales just didn't quite cut the mustard for everybody. They just weren't quite happy about that. And so I think that's part of the reason. Now, let's talk about where this knife was made or maybe not made. Hopefully you can see this right here. Do you see the name of the city that this knife was made in? 𝗬𝗟 City, Japan. So these were made in 𝗬𝗟 City, Japan, and this is a typo on here. If you know your Spyderco and where they're all made and all that, you will know this is just a typo. This is just somebody who got it wrong, man, and not the first time I've seen this. I have some of I think the Sage 5s also had an incorrect spelling on the Taiwan location, which is also escaping me right now. I'm having some senior moments here today. At any rate, this is kind of funny. Seiki City is where this should have been made and where the real ones were made, and that was part of the reason why it probably was so expensive. You know, Japan makes some very good knives. They're well respected, and just, you know, the cost to make them over there in whatever steel it was, that kind of doomed it to a relatively high price tag. Super cool design. You can see even in the closed position, it has a nice clean teardroppy kind of shape. Overall, very cool. Unique plunge grind would be the other thing I would point out that's pretty unique to this knife. You can see how the plunge grind comes across here at this angle. The suspicion is because Paul was an engineer, an automotive engineer, he would understand strength points and weak points of your metal. And so instead of going straight up and down across the Spidey hole, as most of their Spyderco knives does, he chose to, I think, angle it across here to give the maximum strength to the weakest points of the steel. So again, I don't know how hard of a use knife this is going to be for anybody, but that was a well thought out design choice, and you got to give them at least credit for that. All right. Again, I would love to know what you guys think about this. Oh, let's do a little quick cut test. I did mention I had sharpened it. This thing is absolutely a laser beam. How you can tell on that is you can just push it. You don't have to slice. Instead of slicing, I just get it started and push it on that same spot all the way through. So this is a fantastically thin, slicey blade. Yeehaw for that. All right, I think that's it. I'm going to bring it on home. Again, if you haven't already, I would love to have you join our band of renegades. Hit that subscribe notification bell down there. If you haven't already, make sure you please give me, sorry, I got to clean my table here. Please give me a thumbs up on your way out the door. Otherwise, y'all let me know down in the comments. If any of y'all bought one of these, you have the real thing. What do you think about a knife like this? Is this something that would find its way into your regular rotation? I got to be honest, I carried it for a little while, used it for a few things just to see how it carried, how well the pocket clip worked, how it fit in my pocket, did it stay there, etc. Got a few boxes and some letters with it, not anything too hardcore, and then just I have to move on. I have so many knives I'm trying to review. I have to try to carry them all to give you guys at least some kind of decent feedback about how it fits and carries. I love it. I love the design. I'm glad to have one. I'm glad I only had to pay 25 bucks for it. I don't know that I would have paid $190 for one in a VG10 steel. But that being what it is, very cool, very unique design. Nothing else like it that I've ever seen out there, unless y'all have seen something. So let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Always love to hear y'all's thoughts on it. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.